around at Northern Tier is not necessarily difficult, but until you're familiar with the terrain, the maps, and how to place yourself on the map, and then orient yourself in the world around you, you'll have no idea where you are or where you're going, which can be a huge problem. You see, getting around at Northern Tier requires an understanding of paddling and portaging, but it also requires a lot of navigation. And until you understand navigation at Northern Tier, you could literally be paddling around in circles. So this video is all about teaching you the skills needed to effectively navigate at Northern Tier. So grab a cup of coffee, find this great spot where you can focus, and let's settle in to learn how to navigate at Northern Tier.
Hey, real quick, right before we jump into this video, if you'd do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Also, thank you for subscribing to this channel. If you'd like to be notified of future videos, please hit that bell icon. Have a great day and enjoy this video.
I'll say it again. Everything you're about to learn is not difficult. The difficulty is in the reality that most people aren't used to navigating like you need to navigate at Northern Tier. Say, for example, when you're out backpacking. Most rely heavily upon the hiking trail. They just follow the hiking trail wherever the hiking trail goes. Or they're over-reliant on technology. Or maybe in the case of Philmont, there's a lot of signage to help them get around. Well, at Northern Tier, there are no signs to tell you where you are. There's no signs to tell you where you need to go. There's no hiking trails to follow. You're literally paddling on a lake. So there are no trails to blindly walk along, and there's nothing in the wilderness at Northern Tier to say, I am here. So you have to understand how to navigate for real. Now, this isn't meant to scare you, but you do need to understand that things you may have relied on in the past, say at Philmont, you can't rely on at Northern Tier. And the reality is, navigating at Northern Tier is straightforward and simple, provided you know how to do it. And that's what I'm going to teach you, the simple and straightforward method of navigating at Northern Tier. Now, everything you're about to learn is extremely important for your success at Northern Tier. And with all that out of the way, let's get into this video. Let's talk about the tools of the trade for navigation at Northern Tier. Well, first on the list are your eyes and your brain. You're going to need to use your eyes along with the map case, and compass, and we'll talk about all that in a minute. But principally your eyes and your brain to look for clues and to keep up with where you are. All right, second, you're going to need a map. Third, you're going to need a map case. With the map case, you're going to need a carabiner or some way to clip the map to you. Even if you roll the canoe and end up swimming, you're going to need your map to stay with you. In your map case, you're going to need a regular compass. That would be a compass you can use with navigation with a map, and you're going to probably like to have a ball compass. And then lastly, you might also want a GPS, and a GPS preferably with a digital map of the areas you'll be in with the campsites and the portage trails on a digital map in the GPS. So those are the tools of the trade for navigation at Northern Tier. Let's talk about your float plan. Your float plan is created with your interpreter at base camp. The float plan is the general route that you will take for your entire trek. And so Your crew, along with your interpreter, will have a discussion, and then you will create your float plan, and then you will file that float plan with Northern Tier so that Northern Tier knows basically where you are and which route you're taking on your trek. As a crew, you need to spend some time familiarizing yourself and basically memorizing your float plan so that you can stay on the route that you followed with Northern Tier. So within the float plan, you decide how much you want to paddle on any particular day and what campsite you want to stay in, which is different than maybe, say, if you've been to Philmont. So at Philmont, you have to be in a particular campsite at a particular day, and that is not Northern Tier. At Northern Tier, it's a public space. You can camp at any campsite that's available. It's free. So that's one difference between Northern Tier and Philmont. So then every day you'll be navigating from one point or campsite to another that your crew has chosen to stay at, or as your crew has found to be available or empty. Let's talk about the landscape that you'll be in. All right, so you'll be on water when you're canoeing, which is, of course, flat. And then you'll have the shore or the terrain. What you need to understand is there are hills. It's not completely flat, but there's no mountains per se. So with respect from the perspective of sitting at water level in your canoe, you can't easily define changes in the shoreline. Okay, unless it's a large change, like there is a peninsula, a cove, maybe an inlet of another lake. So to identify visually from the water level differences in the shoreline to help you navigate, it's going to have to be a large change. In the Boundary Waters canoe area, when you get used to spotting campsites and you know what you're looking for, those can be fairly easy to find. Okay? Especially if you have kept up with where you're going on the map, and so you know that you should have a campsite, say, on your left side or your port side of your canoe at 10 o'clock, and you're looking for it. You say, oh yeah, there it is. I can see the campfire ring. I can see the beach landing site. So in the Boundary Waters around Ely, because those are usually well used, you can find them. In Canada, that can be a completely different story, because in Canada, it could be literally an overgrown shoreline. Portage trails on the Boundary Water canoe area, where it's more populated, you could see groups on the portage trail. And so then you would say, oh yeah, there's the portage trail because I can see a group on the trail or loading or unloading their canoes on the portage trail. Otherwise, it can be more difficult to spot. Remember, it's just a trail leading off into the usually the woods. In Canada, you may never see the portage trail. So the big difference between the Boundary Waters canoe area, especially around Ely, where it's used, everything's used a lot, and up in Canada, is that up in Canada, the campsites and portage trails can be hard to find sometimes. Now, you've heard me say this phrase, the terrain is all different, but it all looks the same. So what does that mean? Well, from water level, the terrain all looks the same. Now, it is different, and once you learn how to identify the larger shoreline changes, especially at a distance, and you can notice campsites and portage trails, okay, then yes, it all starts to look different. But at the beginning, it literally all looks the same. So why is this important? Well, when you're navigating, you have to know where you start, and then you have to very closely keep up with where you are. If you lose track of where you are on the map, then you can easily get turned around and then essentially become lost. And since everything looks the same, especially if you have confusion with the map and the world around you, you need to remember that you're in a maze of lakes. And so short of having a GPS or a group to ask, you could waste a lot of time trying to figure out where you are on the map. I also want to remind you that Northern Tier is different than Philmont in that at Philmont you have signs everywhere that can tell you where you are. You have campsite signs. You walk into staff camps. You have UTM guideposts that literally give you your UTM coordinates. Okay, none of that exists at Northern Tier because it's private. It's public property. Philmont can do that because it's private property. So at Philmont, you can kind of get around, even if your group doesn't really know what they're doing, because as a crutch, they've given you all these clues and their own map, which is kept up to date, which helps you navigate. At Northern Tier, you don't have any of those. You don't have any of those crutches, if you will. There are no signs. You're in public spaces. You have to keep up with where you are at all times. All right, now let's talk about how to actually navigate on the water while you're canoeing. Well, first, this is an active activity. This is not passive in any way. You have to be engaged. Remember to use your eyes and your brain at all times. Second, your map must be in a place where you can access it while in the canoe. And if you're the navigator and you're not paddling, well, then you can look at the map and the world around you and have, honestly, plenty of time to do that. If you are the captain and you're having to paddle as well as navigate, you're going to be very busy. So you need to know how you want to clip your map case with the map in it and the compass to yourself in a way that allows you to glance down at the map while you're paddling. You need to memorize where you are departing from. So in the morning, what campsite you're leaving from. You need to understand where you're going, what route you're taking for the day, and more or less where you want to end up. You need to memorize that because you will not have time while you're paddling, especially if you're captain and you're paddling and navigating at the same time. You're not going to have a lot of time to figure this out if you haven't memorized it. So basically you need to memorize where you're going for the day and what route you're taking. So you need to know which map you're on. Okay, you need to understand more or less what lakes or features get you there before you leave camp. So get all the navigators and captains together and say, we're here, you're all in agreement, we're going more or less here today, and we're taking this route. So everybody starts today off on the same page, if you will. Once you've departed camp and you're on the water, now your job is keeping up with where you are. So once you know where you're leaving, now you're looking at the terrain around you, you're looking at your map, you're saying, I need to go along this route, the terrain should look like this, and then you are confirming, looking at the world and your map, you're confirming to yourself everything is in alignment. Everything matches, it's where I expect it to be. As far as following along the route that you've chosen, I have a video on reading the environment. I would highly suggest that you watch that video. Also have a video on reading the map, and you need to understand that as well. So when you're paddling along your route, given the information I've given you in those two videos, okay, you need to choose which route across, say, a big body of water, okay, best suits your time and distance and for your group, okay? It helps to put the strongest navigator and captain out in front at the first part of your trip because boat crews tend to follow the first boat crew, even if they're wrong. As you paddle along, either the navigator is sharing with the captain, we need to paddle towards that point, for example, that spot in the world, or the captain, if there is no navigator, has to figure out that on their own. So you need to pick out a object, say in the path you're headed, that's distinguishable and you can keep up with, like a large tree, a rock formation, maybe the tip of a peninsula, something that you can see that's along your route. And so that gives you a target, something to paddle towards. If you don't have a target, you'll end up kind of zigzagging back and forth across the lake potentially. So having the target gives you a goal and gives the captain an object to paddle towards, because you likely almost always will never be using the same stroke consistently. Depending on the wind and a lot of other factors, the captain is going to have to be using a variety of different strokes to keep the canoe headed to the same place or towards the same object. So pick out an object, something you can see that's along your route, something you can paddle towards. All right, now that you have your target picked out along your route, you're paddling towards that target. That helps you keep you in a straight line. Once you're doing that, look down at your map. What is the shoreline supposed to be look like? Are there any upcoming coves or inlets or peninsulas or rivers or lakes, campsites, portage trails that I should be seeing? If you have a ball compass, it's easy just to glance down and say which way's north. Am I headed more or less in the right direction? Okay, then you look back up. You look around you, to your left, to your right, straight ahead, and you match the terrain features that you're supposed to see in the map with the real world. Okay, and so then you're keeping up with those changes in the shoreline, for example, as you're paddling along. So you're like, okay, we should have this big peninsula on our left and a cove coming up on my right. There should be a campsite right here. And then as you pass those, you are checking those off mentally on your map. You're checking them off in your head, saying, okay, we've passed this point. Now we're looking for this other campsite or cove or inlet or whatever it is. And you just keep doing that over and over again till you get to where you're headed. So then, as needed, I've already talked about picking out a target. As you paddle along, just to reiterate, you need to have a target picked out, and as needed, you know, if your target is a peninsula, when you paddle past that target, not to be Captain Obvious, but you need to pick out another target along your path, and you just keep repeating this whole process as you move along your route for the day. Okay, let's talk about roles and responsibilities within the boat crew. Now, I have a whole video on this, so I'm not going to go into detail here, but everybody in the boat crew has a job to do and also a secondary job. So go watch that video, understand what everybody's supposed to do. To add one more thing to the video, okay, the captain and the navigator need to keep up with where the other boat crews are so that no boat crew gets left behind. Okay, so that everybody can stay together as a group. And then also when either the navigators and or the captains, I'd suggest when you get to a portage trail, probably on the departure side, would be my suggestion. You huddle up. You're going to count bags, count people, and then you're going to confirm that, hey, we are headed here. And then the crew can take off from that point. All right. Most of your navigation will be macro level navigation. That's my term. That's basically you're keeping your head in the environment and you are matching the environment with your map. So you don't need to know precisely where you are. You generally know where you are. That's the most efficient way to do it. There's no reason to really get out your compass and take a bearing off of something unless for some reason you absolutely need to, which is why you have a compass that is capable of being used with a map. This is also why the ball compass is really great. And so let's talk about compasses and the GPS and their role in navigation in Northern Tier. I want to talk about the ball compass first because that will be the most important tool that you have. The little ball compass is extremely helpful because you can just glance down at it. It always points north. It isn't affected by the roll and pitch of the canoe. And honestly, most of the time, you just need to know which way north is. Once you know where north is, then you can look at the map and compare where you are on the map with your compass heading, your boat's heading north, and get everything in alignment there. You do not need to triangulate your position. Now, for an actual compass, I'm talking about a compass that meets all the criteria for actually using a compass with a map. Those compasses are affected by the roll and pitch of the boat because the canoe is always moving around, and so the needle can get hung up because the needle has to be flat. You can't hold the map flat unless you're the navigator and you aren't paddling, okay? If you're the captain and you're having to paddle and look at the map and a compass, that means you're not paddling, and then you are allowing the boat to be moved around by the wind, okay? You're almost never going to need to be able to triangulate your position. You just generally need to know I'm here and I'm going there. So why do you have to have a real compass? Sometimes you need to say, hey, I need to take more or less canoe on this bearing, okay, to get to a specific place. Okay, so that would be why you need a real compass. And maybe you just don't have a ball compass. So there's the other reason why you have a real compass. Make sure your compass stays in your map case where you can see it and use it. It hasn't flipped upside down. You may also need a real compass for measuring distance on your map. Declination at Northern Tier is basically 0, so you don't need anything to calculate or account for declination. Now for a GPS, in my opinion, a GPS is a backup navigational aid. It would not be something that you would be using all the time. Your GPS, it really helps to have third-party map software loaded into your GPS. So your GPS needs to be compatible with digital maps on the third-party software. Okay, and the software needs to show you where the campsites are and the portage trails. Okay, none of this is necessary, but I'll tell you what, it can be a real time saver in certain situations. You get up in some places that aren't very well populated. You're looking for a campsite, you can't see it, it's a wall of green. You're looking for a portage trail, that doesn't exist because no one's used it in 3 years. There's just a lot of things going on, or you just get completely turned around, or you're covered in fog and you can't see and you just absolutely need to know where you're going or where you are. That's when a GPS helps tremendously, okay? The maps all use latitude and longitude, so make sure your GPS is set up for latitude and longitude. Know how to use latitude and longitude because that's based off of units of 60 and not 1,000 as in UTM coordinates. So that's my spiel on GPS. Of course, it is a battery-powered device, so you need to bring a couple extra sets of batteries if you're going to use a GPS. In general, to kind of close out compasses, your compass can be affected by the local geology, meaning that there are some rocks present at certain places at the Northern Tier bases where your compass needle will be affected by the geology, so then it isn't 100% reliable. Okay, I wouldn't worry about that too much because really what you need to be doing is using macro level navigation, and you're paddling from point to point and you're looking at the world around you, you're looking at your map, and you're confirming with your eyes and your brain that everything matches. If you can do that well, you do not need a GPS and you do not need a compass. I'd still take a ball compass. You still have to take a compass. But point-to-point macro level navigation, looking at the world around you, looking at the map, is about 99% of getting around at Northern Tier. So let me introduce you to an orienteering concept called an intentional offset. To illustrate to you what an intentional offset is, let's take a look at a group traveling along Ema Lake. And here's a map of Ema Lake, and let's orient the map with track up. Track up is the route, the direction in which the crew is headed. So with the map oriented with track up, this is the route that the crew is going to take, which is east along Ema Lake. The crew's destination on Ema Lake is this portage trail. So that's what they're looking for. And when the crew gets out in the open water, they're looking for this campsite located on this island right here, and they're going to use that as a reference point as they navigate. And when the crew arrives at the tip of this island, this is when they have a choice to make. Remember, their destination is this portage trail. The problem is, this portage trail may not be easy to find. For one choice they have, they could travel straight across Ema Lake. The challenge is, they don't know if this portage trail will be easy to find. If they choose this option, when they arrive at the shore and the portage trail is not immediately in front of them, which would be an amazing accomplishment of navigation, they don't know if they have to look to the right or the left for the portage trail. And now what do they do? So this dilemma turns into a huge waste of time. For their second and smarter choice, the crew decides to build into their track an intentional offset. So what is an intentional offset? An intentional offset is a deliberate alteration of your intended course to offset your route to the left or right of your intended destination. The purpose of an intentional offset is to place you deliberately to one side of your destination, so that, in this case, when you arrive at the opposite shoreline, you know which way to turn to begin looking for your destination. So this crew has decided to intentionally adjust their route to the southeast or turn a little bit to the right. Now, instead of continuing straight across the lake with the crew's offset, the crew will turn slightly right to the southeast and closely follow their compass heading or bearing to arrive at the opposite shoreline to the right of their destination. Then upon arrival at the opposite shoreline, using the shoreline as a handrail, they will slowly paddle along the shoreline to the northeast, looking very closely for the portage trail, which I will remind you is literally a hiking trail that dead ends in the water, so it's tough to spot from a distance. And that is the concept of an intentional offset. So try this when you're in this situation to save your crew a lot of time and energy. To close, I'd recommend that on the first 2 days, you put your strongest navigator and captain out front. Boat crews tend to follow the first boat crew, even if they're wrong. Remember to stay together as a group. The navigators, or the captains, if there is no navigator in that canoe, need to keep an eye out on every other boat and where they are, especially the last boat in your crew. The navigators need to agree where they are on the map at the beginning of each day, at each portage trail, and at the end of the day. The crew needs to huddle up in the morning and come up with and agree on where they're going for the day and what route they're going to take to get there. And I really need to stress this point. 99% of the navigation at Northern Tier is what I call macro level navigation. That is using your eyes and your brain to align yourself on the map with the world around you. So you're navigating from point to point along your chosen route. And when you're doing that, ask yourself, does the map look like the world around me? Now, this can be a little tricky for first-timers, as your sense of scale and perception of the world around you are not calibrated to being on the water. Okay, and this is an active activity, and it requires your focus. So let me explain that a little bit. When you're out on the water, you can see, if it's a clear day, you can see possibly for miles. And you can think to yourself, oh, that shoreline's just right over there, when in reality it might be 2 miles away. And your perception of that affects your view and your reality of where you think you are on the map, when in reality, you may not be anywhere you think you're on the map. So you need to understand the things I've taught you in this video on keeping up with the shoreline, following things from point to point, and not get caught up in, oh, it's just right over there. It may not be just right over there. Okay? So, again, you have to stay focused and stay diligent. And let me remind you that 75% of this video is on macro level navigation. 25% was on the use of an actual compass and maybe a GPS. Because your focus and attention needs to be on perfecting macro level navigation. So keep your head in the game and follow the terrain. And last, I would highly encourage you to watch this video several times. There's a lot of important skills that need to be learned and remembered. So when you get out on the water, it's not a confusing mess. And with that, that ends this video. Have a blessed day.
Hey, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you'd like to support this channel, remember, please subscribe to this channel. Tell your friends about it. Thanks for hitting that like button. Everything here is free. I want to give back to the community. I want to give to you everything here for free. I've been out in the outdoors for a long, long time, and it's great that I can be able to give all this information to you. That is what's most important to me. If you would like to give back, I do have a GoFundMe page set up, and you can follow the link. And if you'd like to, if you're a youth with your parents' support, I would gladly accept your donations. Thank you, and have a blessed day.